this evening's author event for the folks that are in-house and folks at home. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we have author Debbie Babitt here tonight at the East Hampton Library to discuss her brand new release, Saving Grace. And I think you'll enjoy this, especially if you're a mystery and suspense fan. So without further ado, I'll turn over this evening to Debbie Babitt.
Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here. I've been coming out to the Hamptons for years, coming to all the literary events at the library, and I can't believe that I'm sharing my character's journey of my debut novel here. It's just such a thrill, I can't tell you. So to everybody who's here in person and watching on Zoom, which, as we all know, used to be a verb, and now it's a place. And I'm just beyond thrilled. I've spent the weekend here signing copies of books at all the bookstores. And yesterday, this could only happen in East Hampton. I went to Hampton, and as I walked into the store, Danielle Steele was buying a signed copy of my book. And there were two of her books right there, and I thought, this is exciting. And there was my book on the top shelf, signed copies, very, very exciting. So I'm just thrilled to be here, and I'm going to read from my book. For those of you who don't know the book, you are about to be transported from your seats here and your homes to a small Bible Belt town in the South. So without further ado, I'm going to read from Saving Grace. Oh, by the way, it takes place over 2 time periods. In 1995, my heroine, Mary Grace Dobbs, is an 11-year-old orphan living with her uncle, who's a Bible salesman, her aunt, and her cousin in the town of Repentance in northwest Arkansas. 24 years later, she's a single mother, and as you'll soon hear, she is about to assume a very important position in town. Without further ado, to repeat what Stephen said, Saving Grace. I was coming up on the anniversary of my parents' death when the girls began disappearing. That summer, 24 years ago, right before it all started, I was the one who wanted to disappear. I nearly got my wish. But 3 months later, I wasn't the reason for the panic tearing through town. I wasn't the one search parties went combing the woods to find, while folks prayed they wouldn't come home with a body to bury. It wasn't my face staring out from the missing children posters tacked to every tree. That was when I really wanted to disappear, just to vanish without a trace. A girl who was really and truly gone, because I knew that nothing I did would change what I'd done. I could repent for 1,000 Sundays and it wouldn't bring back those girls. Was I sorry? I wish I could say I was. I know that I suffered. There were some in town who would say I didn't suffer enough. That I needed to confess, confession being the only true path to salvation. And they might be right, but I was too afraid to travel down that road. That's what I remember most, being scared. Scared I'd be found out. Scared of what I'd see in everyone's eyes if I told the truth. Scared of the evil that felt like it was part of my blood. Something I could feel shifting and growing and pulsing like a second heartbeat. I was terrified I'd burn in hell and I wouldn't ever be saved. Chapter 1. The summer of 2019 was sure to go down as one of the wettest on record. It had been raining almost nonstop for more than 2 weeks across most of northwest Arkansas. The rivers and lakes had risen to dangerously high levels, and flooding caused the closings of dozens of towns. Those looking for signs and doomsday portents could always find it in the weather. The big news this July is the death of Parnell Vaughn II. His auto body and repair shop has been a fixture in town for decades. with the first shop started by his great-great-grandfather. Lawn was the closest thing to royalty and repentance, so a funeral procession has been planned down Main Street. As if ordained by God himself, the weather miraculously clears up, which is just confirmation for the folks who take the weather as a sign. The whole town has turned out for the spectacle, with everyone craning their necks for the first glimpse of the expensive pine coffin that some already viewed at the First Baptist Church the evening before. Standing next to her daughter, Mary Grace has eyes only for the last pallbearer. She stares at the familiar, beloved face as if she didn't just see him in church yesterday. At 38, Parnell Vaughan III is as achingly beautiful as ever. The sight of him now, in his dark mourning clothes that are a counterpoint to his fair beauty, with the gray at his temples just adding to his allure, once again fills Mary Grace with a rush of emotions. On the receiving line last night, she approached Parnell, thinking this was the time to finally put all the bad blood behind her. As she stood in front of the man she'd loved most of her life, she repeated the condolences she'd just sent to his stricken mother and sister. Mary Grace knew how it felt to lose a parent, even if her folks had been gone a long time. You never get over that kind of loss. Thank you, Mary Grace. The four words the first Parnell had spoken to her in 2 decades were a death knell in her ears. He didn't call her Gracie, the longtime nickname she only allowed him to ever call her. Instead, he uttered her 2 Christian names with no emotion, his face stony, hands stiffly at his sides. So different from the last time they met, that terrible encounter in the woods 24 years ago. Yet, in spite of everything, she still hoped that with time they could get past the tragic events of that long ago November and begin to move forward. But there are some wounds that won't heal, some sins that can never be forgiven. No one knows that better than Mary Grace. But death isn't done with their town. On a gloomy, overcast day in early August, an aneurysm in Owen Kennedy's brain ruptures while he's fishing on a rare day off. This time, there's no procession down Main Street. But 24 hours after Kennedy is laid to rest beside his wife Sheila, his chief deputy, Mary Grace Dobbs, is sworn in as the first female sheriff of Hampton. Mary Grace is still grieving the loss of her friend and mentor when the devil comes back to town. He shows up just ahead of a storm front that lights up the skies with the most spectacular display of God's fireworks anyone ever saw, and folks are sure to be talking about for months to come. His arrival sets tongues furiously wagging, some wondering how he managed to slither in back without their knowing. Others insist the devil's been here all along, which makes still others question why he would be here all this time without making his presence known. But all agree it's a sign. And everyone knows that bad news always travels in packs of 3. True to his name, the reappearance of Darrell Stokes in their midst ignites anger and outrage. Mary Grace feels just as outraged as everyone else, but it's mixed in with another emotion. The guilt that's been dogging her heels for 24 years. That's Saving Grace, and as I said, it's 2 time periods, so it goes back between then and now. Then is Mary Grace when she's 11 years old, and the now is when she's a single mom with the sheriff. And what happens is, as you know, in the past, 2 girls disappear. And then, after the drifter, Darrell Stokes comes back to town, another girl disappears. And that's the mystery. So if anyone has any questions or wants to know how I came up with this, just let me know. I know some people might be writing in also on live stream. Yes, Marge?
Why Orphaned, Arkansas?
Well, that's a very good question. I knew it was in the South because I always start with voice. That's my acting background. So the character came to me as an 11-year-old orphan, and I knew she was Southern. And somehow the Ozarks figured in, and it wasn't the show Ozarks, I hadn't even seen it. But somehow Northwest Arkansas spoke to me, even though it's not the Deep South. And it just really worked for me, and it's a Bible Belt town. And I based Repentance on a real town called Jasper. And I did a lot of research. And about halfway through the writing, I decided that I need to our town and going girls. So I thought Repentance, it's a Baptist town, and they're all very superstitious. So what better than Repentance? So that's how that came about. Yes, Tim.
Where did you get your inspiration for Mary Grace?
Well, basically, she just started talking to me. And what was interesting about that was the 11-year-old Mary Grace started talking to me, and I wrote several chapters, and then the adult Mary Grace started talking to me. So I decided I should go back and forth between the two time periods. She's a child in the then and an adult in the now. And but it's always voice. It always starts with voice for me. It starts with character. And then I have to fashion the plot. And when you're doing a thriller and a mystery, you have to have a very tightly written plot because of all the twists and reversals, and it's not just a character story. So she has to take us on a journey somewhere. That was the inspiration for this book. And I guess for me, I always, as an actress, I like portraying characters in different places. So for me, even though it's not me, it is me, because all your roles are parts of you, and wherever she lives just happens to be where she lives, and the rhythms of her speech and the way she spoke, really, I knew she wasn't from New York, that's for sure. So, yes, Roz?
Yeah, what was your greatest challenge in writing this?
That's a very good question. I'd say the greatest challenge was I started writing and listening to her and kind of taking, I know it sounds very mystical, but kind of taking notes. And I think the biggest challenge was not the research. I suppose the biggest challenge was making sure all the plot twists worked and everything fit in. And you're dealing with two different time periods. So how much information do you disseminate and when should the reader know what they know?
Mhm.
And I guess also I was doing other things. I was a freelance copywriter, so I was fitting it in with all the other writing. So I would say the biggest challenge was working the plot, probably. I would say.
Do you have a system for plotting it out, for mapping it, or it just flow?
Well, it's very interesting because a lot of authors talk about, are you a plotter or a pantser? There are many authors who go by the seat of their pants, which is actually how Arthur Miller wrote Death of the Salesman, which was originally called The Inside of His Head, for anyone who wants to know trivia. And he would just write, and then he realized that he had to put it together. So that's the problem with being a pantser. If you're a plotter, some plotters, they have graphs, or they start with the plot twist, and then they have to figure out the characters in the story. So I would say that I'm a blend of both, because once I start writing with the voice, I then, all right, she took me to Arkansas. She's doing this, she's doing that. Well, now what? What secrets does she have? What is she feeling so guilty about? So I sort of have to figure her out, because I know she has secrets. I know she's feeling guilty. And I know her parents died and these girls disappeared, and she, and she goes to church, and the pastor makes you really feel guilty that we're all born in sin to begin with. So I would say that I had to then put it together, and that's what makes many drafts. Many drafts. Some writers write a full draft. I kind of write as I go, and then once the full first draft is done, I rewrite, and that's because I'm character driven. And that's why it takes longer to make sure the two works. I think I kind of, the books I like are the more literary kinds of books. So I can't just write a fast-paced plot. It's more what's happening with the character. And the plot twists need to come organically from the character. It can't be, I came up with the plot twist and now I have to fit the characters in the story. It doesn't work for me that way. So that's, it's, I would say, when you're character driven and you're not writing a literary book that's just like a Virginia Woolf, it can take place over the course of a day or a weekend, and you're writing in a genre, that's a big challenge because they're almost at odds with each other. Because you have to make the story work, you have to make the readers turn the pages and say, oh, this plot twist, that reversal. So that's, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, I have to say. So, and I work with a recorder, so I speak into that first. Like I'll be walking and speak into it and then transcribe it, which isn't the actual writing. Then that comes later. I don't mean to sound mystical, but
No, it's not at all.
yeah, but that's, you know, people try to discuss process. I remember Robert De Niro was once asked, well, how do you become these characters? And he's like, I don't know. I can't really tell you that. With writing, it's a little easier because you're dealing with words. But it's kind of things happen. And then you have to, things happen, which is kind of very exciting. And then you have to figure out how it all works together. And you keep the thread going and everything. So, yeah. So,
Do you see the book as a motion picture or being
well, actually,
adapted for a film or perhaps a made-for-TV?
well, actually, my agent has it out to the Hollywood agent, and they're very high on seeing it as a limited series for Netflix. And the reason they see it more as a series as opposed to a film is because they feel with the two time periods you have more there. So they're thinking like a 6 to 8 episode on Netflix or Amazon or Prime, but thinking Netflix. But that's true. And it's very visual and there's a lot of dialogue. So it lends itself to that. And in the meantime, I'm working on my second book. I know you were going to ask me that. I knew somebody was going to ask me that. And that takes place partly in New York. And it's about a Manhattan Supreme Court judge. It's very different. But again, that was a voice, a character that came to me.
Is that also a thriller?
That's also a thriller. Yes, there's a courtroom trial. And then A Saving Grace has a lot of scenes in the woods. And as you can see by the cover, and there's snow and there's a blizzard. And the second book, there also will be a small town in woods involved too. So, and that's just about finished, so I'm very excited about that as well. And Mary Grace is not finished talking to me, actually, believe it or not. And you could say I left some loose ends that were subconscious. And you know, it's interesting, there have been a lot of books where Jane Harper's first book, The Dry, I don't know if you've heard of it. A sheriff comes home to his hometown and there's a crime to solve, but it involves his family. And then the people like the characters so much, they brought him back to solve other crimes. So when you have someone in law enforcement, that lends itself. And I've already got ideas for people to this book.
Excellent, excellent. Let's see if the folks at home have any questions.
Yes, Marty.
Who edited it?
Oh, I have a wonderful editor. I hope you're watching tonight, Louisa Smith. She is a dream editor. She's just incredible. She read this book and said, we have to publish this book. And we went back and forth over character and she's been incredible. Really, really incredible. I trust her utterly. She gives me great feedback. And I had sent the full manuscript, so she pretty much, there was nothing that much to revise with it. And she's just terrific. I'm published by Scarlet Suspense, which is a brand new imprint of Penzler Publishers. And that's Otto Penzler. He's the foremost authority on mystery in the country. And his bookshop, the Mysterious Bookshop down on Warren Street, is one of the most famous bookstores in the world. So what's wonderful is that I have a ready-made bookstore to have my launch. My launch was virtually from the bookstore, from the bookshop. I was in conversation with Samantha Downing, USA bestselling author. And Louisa works in Penzler. And then, of course, Charles Perry, I hope you're watching tonight, Charles, is my publisher, and he's amazing. He's not only answers all my emails immediately, he's terrific with social media and graphics. And then there's Jake Shapiro, thinking of somebody else. Hey, Jake, hope you're watching too. I'll tell you all about Jake Bernstein next time. Anyway, he does everything. He gets my books out to readers and Instagrammers. So it's a great team. It's a really great team. And what's interesting is Scarlet Suspense is a brand new imprint of Penzler Publishers. They just started in the fall. And it's called The New Home for Psychological Suspense. So it's great to be part of a brand new imprint. That's the other reason I'm so thrilled to be published by them. So it's been an incredible journey. And I hope my agent Doug Rad's watching too tonight. Doug made the deal and he's going to be amazing.
How long did it take you to write this book?
You know, everybody asks me how long it took to write. What I would say is, when you're writing your first book, you have all the time in the world. You don't have an agent, you don't have a contract. You're living your life, you're doing other work. I work for 5 hours today, now I'll go to the gym, now I'll go to the theater, okay. So I would say a few years. When you have your second book, you're expected to turn the second book in within a year, and every year after that, every year you're supposed to have a book. So it's very different once you have a contract. You have to learn to write faster, and you have to maybe work 15 hours a day. Everyone asks that. They ask, how long did it take you to write? How many pages is the book? Why the South when you're from the North? What's your process? What are some other questions, Stephen, that people ask?
They say, were you influenced by anything, you know, throughout life? Sometimes people have a story brewing for years, and they go, you know what, I remember hearing people, they carry notepads with them.
Right.
They would like write down, or be like, what if work on this scenario, and then they start writing it out over a period of time, and
Right.
it builds into a story.
Well, I've been an avid reader my entire life. Even when I took a detour into acting, I was always writing. And I always had a yellow notepad and pen until I replaced it with a recorder because I kept having to run and get the pad, and I realized it's easier to talk. And so I've always read thrillers and mysteries. Those always been my favorite. Stephen King, who actually Saving Grace was compared to Carrie, and Dolores Claiborne, which was, oh my God, what a thrill. Oh my God, all the great thriller authors you can think of. I love it. They've all influenced me, and probably subconsciously too. But also, and I don't think I'm giving anything away to say that this book does have echoes of To Kill a Mockingbird. You have a recluse living in the woods. You have a Black man accused of crime. Racism plays a role. There's bullying, homophobia. There's a lot of themes. So probably an amalgam of everything. I didn't really think this was a story this was not something I was thinking about until she started talking to me. It wasn't like, gee, I'd like to set a book in the South and talk about racism. It's really her. It was all Mary Grace Dobbs. I feel like she's living thing inside me. But people always ask, what are your influences? And I'd say playwrights too. And also, what I learned as an actress was that character is everything. And Stanislavski, the great Russian director, said character is action. So for me, all the action stems from the character. And that's why when you're doing a thriller, the plot twists still have to come organically from the character. So in answer to your question, I would say it's probably all the years of reading. And I was always writing. I wrote plays for a while as well. So I love dialogue. I was a copy director, as you saw in my bio at Penguin, where I had to write flat copy and back covers. And that's where I really learned to hone my craft, that you have to pack as much information as you can into very few sentences because you have a word count. So that kind of cut away a lot of fat in my playwriting. So And then it was a natural segue to books because I'm writing copy of all these best-selling authors, and I thought, I should write my own book and let them give me great blurbs.
Which they did.
Yeah, so, the thing about playwriting, which I love, was the dialogue, but books give you a much broader canvas. Thoughts, emotions, descriptions, and I've always loved books, from Nancy Drew books, I couldn't wait to get my hands on those black and yellow books. Remember Nancy Drew? Did you read Nancy Drew? Oh my God.
Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys.
The Hardy, right, the Bobbsey
What happened to the Bobbsey twins?
The Bobbsey twins, I forgot about that. But I like Nancy better. I like Nancy Drew.
She's both Harvey.
Thank you, Marjorie. I'm so glad. It's a mutual admiration society, right? Oh my God. But I have to say, it's great to have people to speak to as opposed to everything being on Zoom and not being able to, I've been doing book signings in all the stores, but there aren't really any events yet. So I'm so honored that I got to do an author event. It was just the Baldwin room. Well, I guess Alex did a good job setting up this room. No, but really, this library. It's phenomenal, right? All the great events you do. I mean, this is so wonderful. I'm really just such a thrill to be here. I know the book's in the library, and you said people have been checking it out, which is nice. And if you get your own copy, I can sign it for you with my long pen. Courtesy of my husband, yes.
You want to tell us something about the book cover itself, because it's quite an
Oh,
astonishing
I
looking
think,
cover.
I also want to say that my publishers use Face Out Studio. I think they did an incredible job with this cover. Really incredible, because first of all, it's 2 time periods. So how do you, as the artist, you're thinking, well, how do I capture the story? There are 2 girls on the cover. People may wonder. Now, I'll tell you something interesting about that. There was a copy line on this cover that I wrote. Copy lines stay on the cover until you can get a blurb from an author. So before I got this blurb from Samantha Downey, there was a copy line, which was, I'm the only one who knows what really happened to those girls. So when people see the cover, they say, well, is one of these girls Mary Grace? We're not sure, like, who are the 2 girls? So let people wonder, which is nice. And here, I don't know if you can tell, but it's snowing, because a snowstorm plays a big role in the book. They just did a great job with the trees and the woods and the feeling of foreboding. I thought
Is that a snowstorm that's on the cover?
Yes.
That has something to do with this plot of the
Yes.
story?
Weather plays a big role, as you heard when I read that people look for signs in the weather, which people do anyway. And yes, there are a lot of extremes of weather. There's a drought, which I didn't read, but I did read about the rains. And then there is a huge blizzard. And that's what's covering up part of the letters in the names. And I just think they did a phenomenal job. And I wanted to mention Face Out Studio. I want to thank them and tell them they did it. And they have the twigs on the back too. So what are you seeing? It's upside down?
Yeah, it's inverted.
Whenever I've done these Instagram lives, every time the host shows the book, it's backwards like a mirror. I guess, oh well. But and also the lettering is very big. So from a distance, you really see the book cover. It's really quite amazing because it's actually a couple of restaurants in New York. Eli Zavar and a few other restaurants have put it in their window, and you can see it from across the street because the letters are so big and it's very stark. The black letters, and there's a little red. So thank you. I wanted to bring that. They did a great job. Really beautiful job.
We have let's see. Julie says, Debbie, do you have a character from the past whose story did not come to fruition, like Mary Grace's did? If so, do you plan to return to that character or to write his or her story? And that's from Julie.
A character from the past. I assume not this book. Actually, and the question is, do I plan to write the story? Can you repeat the second one?
Do you have a character from the past whose story did not come to fruition like Mary Grace's did? If so, do you plan to return to that character or to write his or her story?
Yes, I do have a character that I actually wrote the story. The story's almost complete, but I haven't done anything with it yet, but it's a very niche copy of the story. And yes, that's a very good question. Thank you, Julie. And this is a male character. So there's a female character as well. And yes, I plan to bring him into the world as well.
Let's see, we have a question from Anne. Did you write the jacket copy for your book?
I wrote it along with my publisher, Charles Perry. It was a joint effort. We wrote it together. And Anne, just to give everyone a little background, Anne Schwartz was the longtime copy director at Warner Books, which became Hachette. And Anne gave me my first freelance work as a copywriter. And we've been friends a really long time. And she retired several years ago, but copy has always been foremost in both our minds. That's a great question, Anne, and only you would ask that, because no one would think of asking that question. But Charles did a great job. We worked on it together. Thank you, Charles, if you're watching.
Let's see, do we have any other questions from the folks at home? Let's see, no other questions coming in at the moment. Let's see. One of the panelists asked, when is your next book coming out? Is there a date set?
Well, my book should be coming out next spring or summer, I believe. And yes, there is a date. I'm just not sure exactly which month, but it's going to be next spring or summer.
Wonderful.
Probably June. Probably June. And that's the book I was telling you about. It's called First Victim to Babitt and Judge.
Yep, that was the next question. What is the title of your next book? Wonderful, wonderful. Do we have any more questions from the folks in the audience tonight?
Yeah, Debbie, how did it feel when you signed the first book for someone?
Oh my
Was that-
God, it was unbelievable. Well, I'll tell you about the first book. I was in Florida, Singer Island, as you know, and it was published in March, so I was still in Florida. And because there was no launch at the bookshop, Mysterious Bookshop, my publisher's bookshop, which I would have gone back to New York for, and it was virtual, they sent 250 copies to Florida for me to sign, to send back. So I sat outside at a restaurant called Paris in Town, signing books. I had to practice because I'm a lefty, and Ted said, write slowly, make it look nice. A woman comes over to me and says, can you please sell me one of your books? And I said, I can't, these are spoken for, they're going back to my publisher. She wouldn't leave, she insisted, she said, I'll pay you double. They'll never miss it. I said, I can't, I have to send it back to my publisher. But when I signed that first book, I said, I can't believe it, is that my name? It's such a heady, surreal feeling. It's just really incredible. And then when I saw it in the bookstores and saw this title and my name, you know, it doesn't hit you right away that it's you. You still, it takes a while till you really own it. But now, I would say that all the books, I did a lot of bookstores in Florida. I did a lot in New York City. Now I'm doing a lot in the Hamptons. I would say that you never get tired of it. It never stops being new. Several friends of mine have sent me photos from bookstores showing my book under new fiction right up there. And I'm saying, oh my God, that's incredible. You know, what does that mean? Because, you know, you spend your whole life looking at everybody else's books. Bookstores, libraries. When would you ever see yours with your name on it? So,
I just received the word that it is it's presently checked out again.
oh,
So I was gonna
That's
pull it,
exciting.
but it's been circulating well.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's
How many
excellent.
copies are in the library?
We have one copy, but it's been steadily circulating.
Nice.
So usually what happens is if we get a cluster of reserves placed on it,
Yeah.
we'll get more copies.
I see.
So,
Oh.
but steadily circulating is great.
Wow, that's
You
terrific.
just have to come back when it's here and sign it.
You know, when I was in Florida, I went to the Society for Arts, do you know it?
Yeah.
So I went to the King Library and I signed a copy and they put it on a shelf and because I love libraries. I spent my whole life in libraries, checking out. I love sitting there and reading, which I know we'll get back to all that soon, we hope. But there's something about libraries. It's just, as kids, remember our library cards? We could wait to get a library card. Oh my God.
We still have the little
Right?
plastic cards.
Oh my God. And then in the book drops.
Two of them. I have two of them.
Oh my God, that's so, and I think it's so wonderful you do these author talks, especially for someone who's a debut author. It gives us a chance to get out there. People who may not know, don't know our name, they don't know who we are, which is why I appreciated Danielle Steele buying my book because no one asked her to. I think she wanted to support authors. And actually, when I was at Classic Bookshop on North Avenue in Florida, James Patterson walked in while I was there. And they had just put 30 of my books actually on a stand, which was so nice. So he came in because he lives in Palm Beach. He co-wrote another book and he's always nosing around looking to see what's there. And I told him I was a copywriter like he was. So we had a whole conversation and he was very supportive because, you know, when you're out there and new authors come, you know how hard it is when you're starting out.
Name of that bookstore. We met
Classic
Or-
Bookshop.
in Palm Beach,
It's in Palm Beach. It's on, no, it's not on North Avenue. It's on,
Country Road.
yes,
County Road.
North County Road,
County
North
Road.
County Road. Yeah, yeah. There's another bookstore there as well. And then, of course, the Del Rey is right on the beach. I mean, there's so many, and then all the libraries. But the
And you did
Hamptons
a
have a
tour.
special place in my heart.
We did a tour of the Barnes and Nobles up and down the coast of
Up and
Florida,
down
right?
the coast.
Yeah.
But this library has a special place in my heart because we're coming out here 25 years. And coming to all the author events. So it'll, yeah, it's just so thrilling. I can't wait to sign my book after the check.
Look forward to that.
Yes, yes. So those are good, we have some very good questions. So great to talk to a live audience, I can't tell you. Oh my God. I mean, Zoom is great. It's all wonderful
I know,
because you
I
reach
know.
more people, but it's, you know,
It's done.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's, I know, I hope so. We all hope so. And I think, I'll tell you, if I ever wrote this book of what's going on this last year, my agent would say it's not believable. No one will buy it. Right? No one would believe it. Oh, there's a mask on the sidewalk. Who would ever see a mask on the sidewalk? Or say, have you been vaccinated yet?
Hmm.
You know, it's like, oh my God.
Everybody for coming out this evening, folks at home, and for our audience virtually. And thank you to Debbie Babitt for giving this wonderful Q&A talk. Saving Grace, it's available now wherever books are sold locally on Long Island. You have Barnes and you have Bookhampton, Sag Harbor Books, Southampton Books, and Burton's in Greenport. And if you're up island, you got the Book Review. And there are many other independent bookstores, but it's also available from Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. So it's out there.
So get your copy, read it, and we can have a discussion. You can tell me what you think. You'll have a lot of questions, and I would like to know who can guess the killer. I don't think anyone will.